employee of a US spy agency has confessed to operating a small drone that crashed on the grounds of the White House on Tuesday, causing a presidential security scare. A spokesman for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency did not explain why the off-duty employee was operating the device, but he said it was for recreational purposes. It was the latest in a series of incidents raising questions about the US president's security. To discuss drones and the regulations surrounding them, we're joined from Melbourne by Dr. Rhys Clothier. He's Deputy Director at the Sir Lawrence Wackett Aerospace Research Centre and a Senior Lecturer at the School of Aerospace, Mechanical and Manufacturing Engineering at RMIT University. Dr. Clothier, thanks so much for your time. Nice to chat again.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show.
Let's talk about the US first. The US President today said that there was a need now for some legal structures and regulations around the use of drones. He's been pressured for quite an extensive period of time prior to this to get some regulations through, but has been resisting so far. Why does it take an incident like this for someone like the US President to think, actually, we really need to get something in place?
Well, developing regulations for technology such as drones, or like what we like to call them as remotely piloted aircraft, they are rapidly developing technology, and it's very hard for regulators to keep pace with that technology. In the case of the US, the Federal Aviation Administration is really behind the eight ball in the development of regulations for unmanned systems. Unlike here in Australia, the Civil Aviation Safety Authority is actually world leading in the development of regulations for civil drone uses.
You mentioned CASA there, Rhys. I think it's since 2002 CASA implemented its current regulations, which was for model aircraft at the time. Now they're looking at rewriting their regulations this year. I talked to them today. They said they hope that they'll be rewritten by the middle of the year. CASA, even though world leading, is also struggling to keep up with the demand. But what have they got really right so far? Why are the regulations so firmly in place?
Well, the regulations that were put in place in 2002 actually cover all drone operations, both commercial and model or hobby users of the aircraft. So they were the first in the world to do that, and like you mentioned, they are looking at reforming those regulations, working in conjunction with industry to try and keep pace with the rapid development of this technology. But what they have got right, they have put in place regulations that allow both model or recreational users as well as the commercial industry to safely operate. And the purpose of the regulations are to ensure the safety of the population as well as other aircraft users. So we're very thankful as a member of the UAS industry that we've had those regulations in place and that we've allowed to develop our industry to the point it is today.
Okay, regulations aside, how are they enforced? Firstly, by authorities. I understand that it's quite hard to prosecute anyone who breaks any of those rules, but also we've got lots of kids getting these under their Christmas trees as presents. You've also got the issue of, even though regulations might be, say, for example, adhered to, a drone runs out of batteries, for example, and loses flight mid-air and crashes. We can't really combat or gauge for any of those risks, can we?
Look, you touch on a number of issues there, and the first being the distinction between hobby users and the commercial industry. There are regulations applicable to both, in particular, and I recommend viewers to go to the CASA website and seek definitive guidance on the regulations. But for example, hobby users must keep the aircraft within sight, not fly over populous areas or near people. And for commercial operators, they must have a remote pilot's license and operator certificate and seek approval for their operations from CASA. There's one thing of having regulations, and the point you made there was enforcing them, and it is very difficult to enforce these regulations. CASA themselves are not a police force and don't have people on every street corner out there enforcing these regulations, so it is a very difficult task. I think key to this is education, making sure that in particular hobby users are aware of their regulations and the responsibilities they have in flying their aircraft. And CASA are doing a great job through outreach programs and media engagement programs to share that message and share those responsibilities to that hobby and user group.
You mentioned before, Rhys, how difficult it is for any policy or any regulations to be kind of keeping ahead of the actual craft. We've seen such a boom in these craft in the last 10 years or so, 5 years or so, 1 year or so. Once regulations are put in place, do you see a situation where they're going to constantly have to be updated, given that these drones, I can imagine, are only going to get more sophisticated as the years go on?
Yes, you're correct. The challenge is keeping up to speed with the technology and the speed at which it's developing, as well as the new ways that people would like to operate these aircraft that we may have not envisaged in the past. What we would endeavour is to have regulations that are in some way future-proof, that they express more the performance rather than prescriptive requirements. But the task of keeping them up to date is one that will always remain, and it is always a challenge for any technology regulator.
Dr. Rhys Clothier joining us there live from Melbourne. We so appreciate your time again this evening. Thanks so much for talking to us.
Thank you.